The International Crimes Tribunal of Bangladesh has issued a death sentence against former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who remains a fugitive in India, in a case involving crimes against humanity committed during last year's nationwide student-led uprising. Hasina, Bangladesh's longest-serving leader and widely accused of authoritarian rule, fled to India after being forced from office during the massive July-August 2024 protests. Since her ouster, the former prime minister has repeatedly claimed that the Biden administration engineered her downfall, accusations the United States has dismissed, and which protest organizers say ignore the reality that the movement was a spontaneous eruption of long-suppressed public anger. For many observers, the dramatic fall of this once dominant South Asian leader carries significant global relevance. During her 15 consecutive years in power, Hasina faced accusations of dismantling democratic norms through widespread corruption, mass election irregularities, and systemic repression of political opponents. Her government's response to the 2024 demonstrations marked one of the darkest chapters in the country's recent history. According to a United Nations report, security forces killed more than 1,400 unarmed civilians within 36 days, including women and children. More than 20,000 protesters suffered life-altering injuries from Hasina's brutal crackdown, leaving thousands permanently disabled. News of the tribunal's ruling has been widely covered by major global media outlets, including BBC, CNN, Wall Street Journal, The Independent, Reuters, Al Jazeera, Anadolu Agency, and NDTV. The BBC headlined its report, "Former Bangladeshi leader Sheikh Hasina sentenced to death for brutal crackdown on protests." The outlet noted that Bangladesh is facing a historic and turbulent moment as its judiciary delivers a landmark verdict against its former leader. BBC Global Affairs correspondent Anbarasan Ethirajan described the ruling as a critical turning point, saying the 2024 uprising reflected years of pent-up frustration caused by political repression and the silencing of dissent. Major international news outlets continued global coverage of Bangladesh's historic verdict against former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who has been sentenced to death after being convicted of crimes against humanity. US-based CNN reported that the ousted leader received the death penalty following her conviction for directing widespread state violence during last year's mass protests. The Independent in the UK wrote that Hasina was sentenced for the student crackdown, noting that she was tried in absentia on charges of killing hundreds during the 2024 student-led uprising. The paper also highlighted that Hasina has been living in exile in India since fleeing Bangladesh on August 5, 2024. The South China Morning Post, using a similar headline, reported that the former prime minister faced allegations of orchestrating lethal force during the nationwide revolt and was tried in her absence. The ruling is considered one of the most dramatic legal actions taken against a former Bangladeshi head of government in decades. Arriving just months before the country heads into parliamentary elections scheduled for early February, Channel News Asia emphasized the student crackdown charges in its headline and cited a United Nations estimate that nearly 1,400 people may have been killed during the 2024 demonstrations. Singapore's Straits Times noted that Hasina has remained in New Delhi since escaping the country in August 2024 and confirmed that a Dhaka court issued the death sentence on Monday, November 17. Regional and Western outlets echoed the gravity of the decision. The Pakistan Observer reported that the court found Hasina guilty of crimes against humanity, while ABC News highlighted the scale of the student crackdown central to the conviction. Al Jazeera, under the headline, "Bangladesh's Hasina, sentenced to death for crimes against humanity," reported that a special tribunal formally delivered the ruling. Reuters wrote that the court convicted Hasina of crimes against humanity linked to the suppression of student protesters, noting that the verdict was handed down on Monday. In a breaking update, Anadolu Agency added that the Dhaka court also ordered the seizure of all assets belonging to Hasina and one of her close associates. The tribunal responsible for the ruling, led by Justice Gholam Mortuza Mozumdar, also issued convictions against two senior figures from Hasina's former administration, ex-Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal and former Inspector General of Police Abdullah Al-Mamoun. According to the court, the three acted together in a coordinated nationwide campaign that used lethal force to kill protesters and crush dissent. The tribunal's verdict against Sheikh Hasina marks a watershed moment for Bangladesh, legally, politically, and historically. For a nation still reckoning with the scale of last year's violence, the ruling signals an attempt to confront a period defined by repression, mass casualties, and the collapse of democratic safeguards. Yet it also raises complex questions about accountability, political instability, and the country's path forward. As it approaches a pivotal national election, Hasina's continued exile in India, her persistent claims of foreign interference, and the international spotlight on the tribunal's decision ensure that the fallout will extend well beyond Bangladesh's borders. As global media outlets closely track every development, the country faces a defining test: whether it can rebuild trust in its institutions, restore democratic norms, and heal from the trauma of a crackdown that left thousands dead, injured, or permanently scarred. For now, the death sentence handed to Bangladesh's former prime minister stands as one of the most consequential judgments in the country's modern history, an extraordinary reckoning for a leader whose 15-year rule reshaped the nation, and whose downfall continues to reverberate across the region and the wider world.